On the Giza plateau, in the heart of the Great Pyramid, there is a chamber that should not exist. It sits deep inside the structure, above the room the textbooks call the king's chamber, and it is empty. No inscription, no treasure, no body. Just 5 layers of granite beams stacked one atop the other.
A team of researchers sat down in front of a screen, typed a single question into an AI system, and expected mystery. What they got instead was a wall of evidence so plain, so stubborn, and so well documented that it left the room quieter than any ancient alien theory ever could. The question was simple: who built the pyramids of Giza? The answer that came back was not simple at all, and by the end of this video, you will understand why an honest answer to that question is more shocking than any myth we have ever told ourselves about it. Here is what actually happened, as best as it can be reconstructed, and here is why an AI trained on the full weight of the archaeological record ends up sounding almost boring compared to the legends, and why that boredom is, in its own way, the most remarkable twist in the whole story. For decades, a certain kind of documentary has made a living off of a single trick. Take something genuinely astonishing, something that took real human beings real decades of real labor to accomplish, and then quietly imply that ordinary people could not possibly have done it. Strip away the workers' villages, the tool marks, the ramps, the papyri, the inscriptions, the skeletons with worn spines and healed fractures, and replace all of it with a vague gesture towards something we don't understand. It is a seductive move because it flatters the audience. It says, "You are one of the few people smart enough to sense that the official story doesn't add up." The trouble is that the official story does add up. It has added up for a long time, and it keeps adding up more precisely every year as new evidence comes out of the ground. So when researchers turned to an AI system and asked it to lay out, plainly and without editorializing, what the evidence says about who raised these monuments, the system did what it was built to do. It followed the data. And the data leads to Bronze Age Egyptians, in extraordinary numbers, doing extraordinary things with extraordinarily ordinary tools, generation after generation for a very long time. Let's start with the plateau itself, because that is where the AI's answer starts. Giza is not an isolated monument dropped onto an empty desert. It is the center of a vast, connected industrial and residential landscape that archaeologists have been excavating for over a century, and especially intensively since the 1990s. South of the pyramids, on a rise called Height El Ghurab, teams led by Mark Leaner and Zahi Hawass uncovered a purpose-built settlement, barrack-style galleries capable of housing thousands of workers at a time, bakeries with rows of bread molds still sitting in ash, breweries, fish processing areas, copper workshops, and administrative buildings. This was not a mystical camp. It was a logistics operation, roughly the scale of a small city, built specifically to feed, house, and organize a rotating labor force. The bread alone tells a story. Archaeologists found evidence of industrial-scale baking, enough to feed thousands of people daily, which only makes sense if thousands of people were actually there, actually working, actually needing to eat 3 times a day for years at a stretch. Then there is the paper trail, literally. In 2013, a French-Egyptian team led by Pierre Taulet discovered a set of papyri in caves at Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast, dating to the reign of Khufu, the pharaoh the Great Pyramid is built for. Among them was the logbook of an official named Mir, who led a team of workers hauling limestone blocks by boat from the Tura quarries to Giza. The logbook records shifts, quotas, the names of officials, the movement of boats along canals, and the frustrations of a middle manager whose crew occasionally fell behind schedule. It is, in the most literal sense possible, a construction diary written by a person who worked on the Great Pyramid while it was being built. No serious researcher disputes its authenticity. It is one of the most direct pieces of evidence we have from anywhere in the ancient world for exactly how a specific monument, at a specific time, was actually built, and it describes ordinary human beings doing organized, difficult, physical work. We also have the quarry marks inside relieving chambers above the king's chamber, the same chambers that get pointed to in so many impossible pyramid videos as evidence of secret purposes. Egyptologists have found painted graffiti left by the work gangs themselves. Names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, team names scrawled in red ochre paint on stones that were never meant to be seen again once the chamber was sealed above them. These aren't grand religious inscriptions. They're the ancient equivalent of a construction crew signing the inside of a wall before it gets covered up, the same instinct that makes modern tradespeople write their names on drywall before it's painted over. It's mundane, it's human, and it is very hard to reconcile with the idea that some unknown, vanished, hyper-advanced civilization did the real work in secret. So when the AI is asked how, physically, several million blocks of stone were quarried, moved, and set into place without cranes, iron tools, or the wheel as we use it today, it doesn't have to speculate wildly because we have direct physical evidence for most of the steps. The limestone that makes up the bulk of the pyramid was quarried right there on the Giza plateau, a short haul from the construction site. The Tura limestone used for the fine white casing came from quarries across the Nile and was ferried over by boat, exactly as Mirror's papyrus describes. The granite for the king's chamber and the relieving chambers came from Aswan, more than 500 miles south, and was floated downriver during the Nile's annual flood, when water levels rose high enough to bring boats close to the construction site itself. Archaeologists have found the actual quarries at Aswan, including an unfinished obelisk still lying in the bedrock, showing precisely how granite was cut. Not with iron, which didn't exist yet in Egypt in usable hardened form, but with dolerite pounding stones, a rock harder than granite, used to slowly batter grooves and channels into the stone, and with copper tools aided by an abrasive sand, likely quartz, dragged back and forth to saw through softer rock. It is slow. It is laborious. It leaves tool marks that are still visible today, and those tool marks match the tools found at the workers' sites. This is not a mystery waiting to be solved. It is a solved problem with a visible paper trail of stone dust and unfinished blocks. Moving the blocks is the part that captures the most imagination, and it's also the part where real experimental archaeology has done some genuinely satisfying work. In 2014, physicists studying a wall painting from the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, which shows workers hauling a massive stone statue on a sledge, with a person standing at the front pouring liquid onto the sand, ran controlled experiments and found that wetting sand in front of a sledge can cut the friction dramatically, roughly by half, making a load that would otherwise require a much larger team suddenly manageable by a modest one. That single detail, sitting in plain sight in a 4,000-year-old painting, quietly answers a question that mystery documentaries love to treat as unanswerable. As for getting the blocks up to height, we don't have one single surviving ramp preserved in its final built form, because ramps are, by nature, temporary and get dismantled once the job is done. But we have found the remains of construction ramps at other pyramid sites. We have builders' marks indicating leveled courses added progressively as the structure rose. And in 2018, a team working at the ancient alabaster quarry of Hatnub, which supplied material for Pyramid-era Egypt, found a ramp flanked by staircases with regularly spaced post holes, apparently designed to let large teams haul heavy loads uphill using ropes anchored at those posts, at a steep gradient. It is direct, physical, on-the-ground evidence of exactly the kind of technique Egyptologists have proposed for the pyramids for a long time, found not because someone was trying to prove a point, but because archaeologists were excavating a completely different site and happened to find the machinery of the labor system still sitting there in the rock. Now, let's talk about the numbers, because this is where a lot of the mystery-mongering does its best work, and where an AI actually trained rigorously on the mathematics gives a very different answer than the dramatic version wants you to hear. It's true that the Great Pyramid's base is extraordinarily level, and that its sides are aligned to true north with remarkable accuracy. These are real, measured, impressive facts, and nobody serious disputes them. But remarkable and impossible are very different words, and the gap between them is where all the drama lives. Leveling a huge foundation with water-filled trenches is a technique that works extremely well and requires nothing more advanced than gravity and patience. Water finds a level surface on its own, and a network of shallow channels cut into bedrock, filled with water, gives builders a precise reference line around the entire foundation without needing any instrument fancier than a length of string and a plumb bob. As for the alignment to true north, ancient Egyptian astronomers had thousands of years of accumulated skywatching behind them by the time of Khufu, and there are at least two well-documented methods: using the shifting position of certain circumpolar stars observed at different times of night, or tracking the shortest shadow cast by a vertical pole around local noon. that can produce alignment accurate to a fraction of a degree using nothing but patience, geometry, and repeated observation over many nights. It is a genuine achievement of careful, disciplined observational science. It is not evidence of technology from nowhere. It is evidence that Egyptian priest astronomers were extremely good at their jobs. The pi and golden ratio claims deserve their own honest answer because they show up constantly and they sound devastating the first time you hear them. When you divide the perimeter of the pyramid's base by twice its height, you do get a number close to pi. But mathematicians and historians have pointed out for a long time that this is very likely a natural side effect of how the ancient Egyptians measured slope, using a unit called a sect, which described the run of a slope in terms of horizontal displacement per vertical cubit, essentially an early form of rise over run, combined with a roughly consistent choice of slope angle across most of the major pyramids of that era. Do that math and a pi-like ratio falls out almost automatically, without the builders needing any abstract concept of a circle constant at all, in the same way that a wheel produces a circle's proportions without the cart driver knowing calculus. As for the golden ratio inside the king's chamber, once you start hunting for a specific numerical target across enough possible pairs of measurements inside a large stone room, in enough different unit systems, using enough different rounding choices, you will eventually find something close to almost any ratio you're looking for. This isn't cynicism, it's basic statistics, and it is exactly the trap that rigorous data science is built to guard against. A machine learning system trained properly to evaluate a hypothesis doesn't just report a match. It reports how likely that match was to occur by chance given how many comparisons were tried, and when you actually run that check honestly on Giza's measurements, the hidden constants mostly dissolve into what statisticians call the multiple comparisons problem. It looks like a secret code only if you stop counting how many places you looked before you found it. None of this makes the pyramid less impressive. If anything, it makes it more impressive, because the honest story doesn't require inventing a vanished master civilization to explain the achievement. It requires appreciating that a Bronze Age state, over the span of roughly 2 decades, organized tens of thousands of rotating agricultural workers into disciplined labor gangs, fed and housed them at scale, coordinated the quarrying and transport of millions of tons of stone along a river transportation network, trained specialist masons and surveyors capable of extraordinary precision, and did all of it with wood, copper, stone tools, rope, and an unbelievably good understanding of geometry, astronomy, and project management. That is not a lesser story than ancient aliens or lost Atlantean engineers. It is a far greater one, because it is a story about what ordinary human beings, organized well and given enough time, are actually capable of. So, why does the myth persist, and why does it feel so satisfying when an AI or a documentary suggests the pyramid holds some undiscovered secret? Partly it's because genuine mysteries do remain, and it's worth being honest about which ones. We don't have a fully agreed upon explanation for exactly how the largest granite beams, some weighing around 25 to 80 tons, were lifted into the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, though several plausible ramp and lever methods have been proposed and tested at smaller scale. We don't know with certainty the precise internal purpose of every void detected by modern scanning projects, including the Scan Pyramids initiative that used muon tomography to find a previously unknown internal space above the Grand Gallery in 2017. That is a real, current, actively studied mystery, and it's a good one, but we haven't finished mapping every cavity inside a 4,500-year-old megastructure is a completely different claim from a lost global civilization encoded a warning about the apocalypse in stone. The first is normal, ongoing science. The second is a story, and a good one, but a story all the same. There's also a simpler, more human reason the mystery version feels better. It's more fun, and it flatters us. If the pyramids required something extra, lost technology, extraterrestrial help, a forgotten super-civilization, then our own ordinary human ancestors don't have to be given credit for something this staggering, and by extension we don't have to sit with the slightly uncomfortable question of whether we, right now, with all our modern tools, could organize ourselves this well to build something meant to outlast us by 4,000 years. It is genuinely easier to imagine aliens with tractor beams than to imagine a government bureaucracy in 2560 BC running a functioning national labor draft, a river logistics network, and a quality control system precise enough to level a 13-acre foundation to within a couple of centimeters, using nothing but rope, water, copper, and extremely patient people. But that second thing is what actually happened, and the evidence for it just keeps getting stronger every time someone digs in a new spot on that plateau. This is, in the end, what an AI system built to weigh evidence honestly will always come back to, and it's worth sitting with why that answer is more unsettling, in its own quiet way, than any ancient alien headline. It's unsettling because it removes the excuse. If the pyramids were built by some vanished supercivilization, then their achievement belongs to a world that no longer exists and has nothing to do with us. But if they were built by regular people, farmers pulled off their fields during the flood season, fed bread and beer by state granaries, organized into competing labor gangs with names like the Friends of Khufu, trained by architects who understood geometry, astronomy, and hydraulics well enough to level a mountain of stone across 13 acres to within an inch, then the achievement belongs to us. It's a human ceiling, not an alien one, and it turns out to be a lot higher than most of us assumed. That is the answer that actually left the researchers quiet. Not a secret code. Not a countdown buried in granite. Just an uncomfortably clear picture of what disciplined, coordinated, patient human effort can build when a society decides, for reasons of religion, politics, and legacy, to commit everything it has toward a single impossible-looking goal, and then simply does not stop until it's finished. If there's a genuine lesson buried in the stone, it isn't a warning about a coming flood or a message written for some distant future audience. It's a much plainer one, and honestly a more useful one. This is what we're capable of when we organize, plan, and commit for the long haul, without any shortcuts, without any secret helpers, and without giving up halfway through. The pyramids don't need mystery to be extraordinary. They are extraordinary precisely because they weren't a miracle. They were a plan, executed by tens of thousands of people, one stone at a time, for 20 years and finished. And maybe that's the version of the story worth telling, not because it's the strange one, but because, when you actually look closely at the evidence, it happens to be the true one.